All right, so to get to this step, to set up so we can bring our character asset in, what I did was I found my assignment 2 clean PNG, and I duplicated it onto my desktop by holding down Option and dragging and dropping it to the desktop. And then I did the same thing with my assignment 1 PSD. That is my multi-layered, even if it's not finished, assignment 1. And I dragged and dropped that while holding down Option to the desktop. Then I made a new folder called Proving Ground 1, and I renamed my assignment 1 to Proving Ground 1. And then I moved them into that folder, right? And then I opened that Proving Ground 1, not assignment 1, in Photoshop, because Photop is unresponsive at the moment, right? So just like in Photop, you'll see all of your raster layers, and you want to make sure each of them makes sense to you. So I have my background layer. I have my middle ground mountains here, which for some reason have a shadow here. So already we're improving our projects just by interrogating the information, making sense of the data, as this step is called. It's on this one. There we go. So I have to soften that transition a little bit. This can happen because of all the magic wand blending and stuff. We can kind of lose edges. So we're really making sure it all makes sense right now. So we've got the background. We've got the middle ground. I've got a few middle ground, 2 different middle grounds. Then we've got the foreground. Yeah. And then I've got an empty layer, looks like, right here, which bothers me. So what I do when that happens is I turn off everything except that layer. And then I use my magic wand, click on the empty space to see what it is that that layer is. Ah, this is a texture overlay layer. It's like a little cloud. So if I build it back, let's see if it makes a difference. So it looks like it's not doing much at all. So it's just a remnant from that other one. So I can delete that layer. Okay. So you want to make sense of every asset you have. And here's another kind of empty layer. Yep. Not needed. Okay. So yes, this is polishing up, cleaning up, understanding your assignment 1, making improvements where needed. Okay, now save it. Now we're going to move our character asset in. So the stage set is ready. Now we invite the actor to the stage, right? And I always drop my character asset right on top, on the very top layer, and then just hit return. And it will show you its native resolution. The P of your creature, these are the only 2 assets we're using. The PNG of your creature, because that's merged and cut out as one layer, onto the PSD of what was assignment 1, but is now Proving Ground 1. Okay, your creature, you get to decide on the size and the placement. Now, right now, my creature is in front of everything. It's clear that my creature, if I kept it in front of everything, would be in the foreground, right? And I can do that. I can have my creature like perched on this rock in the foreground. That's kind of interesting. Or I can have my creature perched on this rock in the middle ground, which makes my creature a whole lot bigger, right? Or I can have my creature perched on the mountaintop in the background, which makes my creature like 4,000 feet tall, right? So that's 4,000. this is around 400, and this is around 4 feet tall. Right? Foreground, middle ground, or background. And that's without even changing the scale of, or the angle or anything of my creature. I can also just make my creature flying in the air, which could be a lot of fun, right? But if I'm making my creature fly in the air, it would be best if I have it clearly in either the foreground or the middle ground. So what I'm thinking is I want my creature to be like dragon size, so around 400 feet tall. And instead of showing it perched right here, I want to show it flying. So how can I do that? Well, what I can do is sink it behind the layers. And that's all it takes to start with, right? I want to have my creature underneath these foreground layers. Does that make sense? But maybe I don't want my creature in this pose. So before I pose it, I want to decide what size do I want? Well, it's still a smart object. So I can tilt it. Think of its kind of anatomy. I want it kind of flying towards the city. And I want to show that some part of it is being obscured by these foreground rocks. So that's like putting your actors at the front of the stage, at the middle of the stage with certain props in front of them, or at the very back of the stage, right? If I keep sinking that character back, look what happens. Now it's behind the background mountains. Now it's behind more background mountains. And eventually it gets hidden completely, right? So you decide, the first step is to decide where your character should be placed. The other thing you can play with is just Command T. How big do you want your character to be? So maybe I want my character to be like dragon-sized, but not so huge, right? Maybe a little bit smaller. So I just scale it down with Command T. The difference between Photoshop, really the only difference between Photoshop and Photo-P in what we've learned so far is that in Photo-P you have to hit Option Command T. In Photoshop you just hit Command T because it's not in a browser. Right, so I kind of scale it. Now, remember the requirements of the Proving Ground. Your creature needs to be 25% or more of the overall composition. So if I want to keep this full composition, which I kind of do, I want my creature to be pretty big, which means it's either in the foreground or it's a massive creature in the middle ground, right? And it's okay if parts of my creature are cropped off, but I really want it to be visible and interesting. So I'm thinking maybe there. But if I'm not sure, I can always make a duplicate, and I can try some different arrangements. So maybe I make a duplicate, Command J, and then Command T, and I'll say, what if it's in the foreground? You know, perched on the rock, like right there. Make a duplicate. What if it's in the background? You know, angled this way and moved up. And this is like an Aztec deity that's about to destroy Olympus. So I want to push it into the far background, right? Like into the clouds behind those mountains. Right? So you decide where you pose it and where you size it. I'm going to show you one other option you have, right? All of those, my creature takes up about 25% of the overall creature scape. But what if, just for the needs of my project, I'm going to turn off the other options here. These are all still smart objects. What if I decide that my creature is actually going to look best this size, you know, floating in the sky? Or like right on the city. So like that, right? So the problem is, in my whole composition, my creature is not big enough to show off. It's not 25%. But I really like that possibility, that interaction. It's like staring in the windows. I'm going to call this Peeping Tomcat, right? So if I want this composition, notice I have plenty of resolution. What I would do is I would use my guides to frame a new composition. You are not stuck with your original composition. I might do something like this and then crop it. If I really wanted that framing. And that's how your resolution and your size can change from the original. And you want to do whatever you find most interesting. This is for your portfolio, whether it's screen resolution or print resolution. So if this is how I want to pose it, is my creature taking up 25% of the overall image or more? Yeah, roughly, right? I think of it like, what quadrant is the creature? It needs to take up at least one quadrant, right? So then if I check the image size, now it's only 6 inches by 5 inches by 300. So that means it's no longer big enough to print 8 by 10 or bigger. So it's not print resolution. So what do? I uncheck resample, right? And I put in 72, which is screen resolution. So at screen resolution, this would be 28 inches by 22 inches, which is big enough for any kind of website full screen image. It's still 2000 by 1600 pixels. It's just not big enough for 8 by 10 at print resolution. So that's how your resolution and your size can change for this project. So I'm going to have you guys vote. Yeah, go ahead. Why did it reduce it? Okay, so remember, before I did this, before I cropped, I created these from different high resolution images, right? And my image size, this would be for assignment 1, was 14 inches by 20 inches by 300. Notice that it's always going to be the same pixel dimensions. To keep your pixels clean, we don't grow them. We don't resample them, right? So those are locked. So this is big enough for printing. But when I crop down to this box, right, in order to make my creature big enough, I lose all of those pixels. So when I go to image size, that pixel dimension has decreased a lot. And now it's only 6 inches or 7 inches by 5. And our definition for whether something can be printed is whether it can be the smallest standard size for a standard portfolio, which is 8 by 10 inches, or not for our midterm. And this cannot be, this is smaller than 8 by 10, right? So the only option is, since I can't print it, I need to see what these pixels are in screen resolution, because that's the other option for the proving ground. And at screen resolution, it's basically 29 inches by 23 inches. But this would be called screen, not print resolution. Does that make sense? Okay. Both of them are acceptable. That's why you see those as the past examples. So I'm going to have you guys vote. Do you guys like this composition? That's going to be option 1. Do you like this composition? That's going to be option 2. Do you like this composition? That's going to be option 3. It's going to be flying in the air behind these rocks. And I think those will be the only options because I don't really love the Galactus one. Okay, so let's look at them again. And actually, I think I missed it, but it would be 1, 2, or 3. Okay, let's have hands up for 3. We'll go backwards. Okay, hands up for 2. Okay, hands up for 1. All right, so it's between 1 and 3. So let's eliminate 2 as an option, which, yeah, I'm not super fond of. Let's see, which one was that? That was this one. It's going to be the one on top.